inadvertently create a situation where.
If so.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I had to promise all the other board members I wouldn't tell any more jokes at the beginning of a session. So we will instead go right to item 2.5, the approval of the budget and legislative request. And Vice Chancellor Osmena and Vice Chancellor Mattoon.
Great. And I think we've got slides that are coming up. Perfect. So just thank you very much. Vice Chancellor Mattoon and I are going to present the 1920 budget request, which comes on the heels of a 1819 budget process that I think is finally coming to an end. The governor today signed the final education trailer bill, AB 1840, which made a series of changes related to the student-centered funding formula. So I've just, as framing, I think what this item represents is a kind of parameters or guideposts around how Vice Chancellor Mattoon and I represent the system's interests before the legislature as part of both the 1920 budget process and the legislative process. I think one of the things that makes this a little bit sometimes difficult to kind of wrap our hands around is overall, for most community college funding, the Proposition 98 guarantee determines the overall level of funding. So, our budget is driven in large part, though not entirely, and we'll talk about that with financial aid, but in large part by changes in the Proposition 98 guarantee. The kind of the definitive sources of what that guarantee is projections by the Department of Finance and projections by the Legislative Analyst's Office. And so, there are numbers and historical practices about what share of the guarantee community colleges receive are largely what define the overall budget. And then many of the conversations we're having are around how do you distribute the funds within that overall funding level across various priorities. And that's what we're hoping to talk to you about today. So I use this slide in every presentation I give before the board now. And so this is just to suggest where we are in this process. So we are at essentially the start of the process where agencies across state government, including ours, are submitting requests to the Department of Finance for consideration by the governor for inclusion in his January budget. The interesting part of this year is that the governor-elect will be making a lot of the budget decisions for January. And so we have a bit of a delayed process in making our case to a new governor about what to include. So, right now I would the Department of Finance is building a baseline budget, a workload budget of what it would cost to maintain existing policies and programs. And then come November, our intent would be to present the document that you produce and that you adopt to the new administration for their consideration.
Last year, Vice Chancellor Rodriguez and I, for the first time, created a joint process for the legislative and budget request. Vice Chancellor Osmena and I are continuing that tradition, recognizing that so much of what happens in the legislature could come through either the budget process or through a bill process, and also recognizing, as Christian pointed out, because of the implications for Prop 98, so much of what we want to accomplish will have fiscal implications, and therefore our chances of success are usually higher if we can approach those changes through the budget process. I included this slide so you have an understanding of what the legislative bill process looks like. The legislature has not yet formally adopted its legislative calendar for the next year, so those dates will be included once that decision is made, but the months are the correct months based on legislative rules. And then similarly, we're at the very beginning of this process where we would be moving after this document is adopted to begin conversations with our legislative colleagues about the priorities of this board and the opportunities both through policy bills as well as through the budget process to adopt some of those priorities. This process is governed by the Education Code. 70901 essentially directs the Board of Governors to work in consultation with stakeholders, including Consultation Council specifically, to develop a budget for the system. The Board of Governors is directed to essentially identify the financial needs of our system to ensure that our system can meet the goals of the system and the needs of our students. Similarly, standing orders established at the Board of Governors wants the Chancellor's office to work with Consultation Council and seek the advice of consultation regarding positions on any state legislation.
And so over the past year, Vice Chancellor Mattoon and I worked to formalize what had in the past been a more informal process into that reflects your policies and that provides stakeholders with some certainty about how their feedback would go into informing our requests. We presented this calendar at the July meeting. I'll quickly review it. This began in May when we presented to Consultation Council our plan for how we would go about receiving requests and considering those requests as part of this process. In July, we reviewed the requests that were received, and in August had a conversation that I think both Vice Chancellor Mattoon and I found very helpful in getting feedback on a draft proposal and better understanding what the priorities of the variety of stakeholders in the room were. We are here today to present and seek approval of that proposed request that incorporates amendments based on our Consultation Council conversation. After this meeting, if approved, or with any amendments you make, we would present this to the Department of Finance and continue to work with the incoming administration in November and December to include this in the governor's budget and work with the governor and the legislature to introduce any related legislation.
We received a number of requests that didn't ultimately make it into this document. And we received also some questions about why. And so this slide really provides to you the criteria that our office used in determining what was appropriate to include in the request that came forward to the Board of Governors. The first criteria obviously was furtherance of the vision for success. We asked submitters to clearly identify which goal in the vision for success their proposal furthered and how it furthered that. We also asked proposals to be statewide in nature, not specific funding pots for specific colleges. We asked that evidence be provided as to why the solution actually responded to the identified problem. We asked for compelling evidence for why there should be state intervention in what is ultimately a system of local control. We asked it to consider prior statements of the Board of Governors as well as the interests of the governor and the legislature.
And so we'll walk through these items were included in the agenda, and they're included in the long document that is included as an attachment to the agenda. But essentially, we framed the request in 5 parts. And these, we'll talk in general about specific amounts. We've estimated the costs of certain changes. But again, the overall Proposition 98 guarantee would determine the total amount of funding we think is reasonable and would guide our negotiations with the governor and the legislature. So the main priority we've identified here is adjustments to the rates specified in the student-centered funding formula. In prior years, we've talked often about the increases in operating costs that community colleges are facing for a variety of reasons across a variety of costs of expenses, a variety of different expenses. What we are proposing here is that under the student-centered funding formula adopted by the legislature and the governor this year, we would grow the rates for each of the measures included in the formula. So what we've simulated there is the cost of a 5% adjustment, and that would cost about $345 million. This would be on top of, so we would separate this from our traditional requests for additional resources for cost of living adjustments, and then additional resources for enrollment growth. And under this approach, we would work to simulate the effects of changes in a college district's demographics, which affect the supplemental allocation, and the effects of changes in outcomes. So we would consider those workload adjustments. We would expect that the governor and the legislature would budget those pursuant to existing law. And then we would, what this request is doing is saying for each of the rates we're funding those factors, we want to grow those rates at, whatever is funded, whatever is reasonable within that overall Prop 98 picture, but we think 5% would be kind of a good target for us to focus on. Then there's 2 smaller items there related to the student-centered funding formula. The first is $250,000 in 1920 and 2021. $500,000 total to support the oversight that was created, the oversight committee that was created in legislation that was approved today. And so the bill creates a 12-member oversight committee with 4 members appointed each by the governor, the Senate Rules Committee, and the Assembly Speaker. Our office is charged with entering into a contract to staff the committee. For 18-19, funds have not been provided for staff for the committee. The work of the committee spans those 2 subsequent fiscal years, and so we're requesting funding to support those costs. And then the bill also requires, and legislation also requires, that we conduct evaluation and we answer some questions for the governor and the legislature about how those reforms are being implemented. We've estimated those costs at $750,000 total. Again, $250,000 for 3 fiscal years.
Our second bucket focuses on the comprehensive supports for all students. The first item in this bucket is a request focused around the general fund portion of the budget, not within Prop 98. And essentially, we are asking to engage in a conversation with the next administration and the legislature about the ways in which our current state's financial aid program needs to be reformed in order to better serve our students. The write-up in this item provides a few numbers that I think are really illuminating in terms of the inequities in the current Cal Grant structure. But just for reference, I would mention that 40% of undergraduate students at UC, 36% of undergraduate students at CSU, and only 9% of undergraduate students in our system currently receive a Cal Grant. In terms of dollar amounts, we serve 2/3 of the undergraduate students in this state, and we only receive about 7% of the Cal Grant dollars. The reason for that is really twofold. One is that Cal Grant focuses primarily on the cost of tuition, and as you well know, tuition for community colleges is the lowest in the nation, and more than half of our students pay no fees at all. So the focus on tuition only in terms of financial aid has meant that there's not an identified need associated for our students. What we know is that the cost of books and housing and food, those are the costs that students face and really need to have covered in order to be successful. The other reason that our system doesn't do well in the current structure is that Cal Grant focuses primarily on students who are within 1 year of graduating from high school. Most of our students are not that traditional age student population and therefore receive no benefit from the Cal Grant program. There's been a number of reports this year issued by the legislative analysts, by appropriations and budget committees, by the Century Foundation, and all of them say the same thing, which is that the state needs a significant investment in the state's financial aid program. Estimates are about $1.5 billion. It's currently a $2 billion program, and that the vast majority of those dollars should be directed at community college students to cover the associated costs of education, those additional costs that are non-tuition-based costs that students face. The second item on this list focuses on the Student Equity and Achievement Program, consistent with the 5% increase that Vice Chancellor Osmeña mentioned for the funding formula. We're requesting a 5% increase in the program that was created this year. This is the consolidated categorical that is identified to support closing achievement gaps and improving student successful outcomes. We're similarly asking for a 5% increase in this program. And then the last item on this list focuses on the need for students and colleges to understand what resources are available to students. So we're calling this College Success Awareness Team, and the role of this team would be to identify the information and resource needs and professional development needs of colleges and better explaining to their students both pathways in terms of transfer pathways around the associate degree for transfer, as well as financial aid pathways. What does a promise mean locally? How is it incorporated with other financial aid resources that are available? So the goal here would be $5 million and then 2 full-time staff for the Chancellor's office to support this work. The next bucket focuses on the role of educational professionals in the success of our students. The first request here is for $25 million in ongoing funding for professional development that would focus both on our faculty employees as well as on our classified employees. The second request focuses on ongoing funding to support our faculty. This is a $50 million ongoing request. The request itself focuses on the role that the Chancellor's office will engage in through the consultative process to determine how this money should be allocated out to colleges. The bucket here for this $50 million would include full-time faculty, part-time faculty, as well as office hours and additional health and other benefit needs of our part-time faculty. And then the final item in this bucket is for a $15 million one-time allocation to support the creation of a pipeline to faculty diversity program. Essentially, we're recognizing that the diversity of our faculty is not representative of the diversity of our student population. And what we'd like to do is secure a faculty that represents both the racial and ethnic diversity as well as the experiential diversity of our community college students. And we think that we'll be able to do that through a program that identifies community college students while they're still in our system and supports them to and through transfer and graduate school with the agreement that they'll come back to our system and be faculty within our system.
Vice Chancellor Hope, I'm sorry, I want to interrupt right now because we have a few students who have a 3:30 class that wanted to comment on this item, and if you all would like to come up and just make your comments, and then we'll finish the opening presentation. Hi. Please state your name.
Good afternoon, Board of Governors of California. My name is Rafael Bermudez, and like most students here, I come here telling a story of success. I'm a biology major, and hopefully someday with the hard work and commitment, I will become a cardiothoracic surgeon and save lives. Southwestern College is a huge stepping stone for my future, but it is also a place where I am creating memories with each passing day. Programs such as Extended Opportunity Programs and Services, or EOPS, has made my school experience more enjoyable without worrying if I have to pay $300 for a math book, because math books are pretty expensive. Within EOPS, Guardian Scholar Programs is another program which I am grateful to be involved. EOPS has shaped and helped me throughout my time in Southwestern College, and hopefully many other students like myself can have the chance to join this wondrous program. I also wanted to thank the Board of Governors for funding this program and making pillars for my future success and the ones to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here and for accommodating our public comment. My name is Paola Duarte, and I am a psychology major, and this is my third semester here at Southwestern College. I am not afraid to say that I am an undocumented student, and this means that I do not have a work permit, and I cannot apply for FAFSA or for most of the scholarships. And it makes it really hard for me to afford college. And this is why I am really thankful that programs like the EUPS are available for students like me. Because if it wasn't for it, I wouldn't be here. Thanks to the EUPS program, I was able to pay for my books for the past 3 semesters. And not only that, but thanks to the amazing counselors that are offered by the program, I knew exactly where I am with my classes, and I know everything that I need in order to transfer. This is only my experience, but I know that more students like me also depend on programs like this. In behalf of every student that is part of the UPX program, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Are there any other students that wanted to speak?
My class is later, but it's fine. So, good afternoon, President Epstein, Chancellor Oakley, and Board of Governors. My name is Rudolph Villegas, and I serve as a student trustee for Southwestern Community College District. So, first and foremost, I want to mention how much of an honor it is, a pleasure, but also an honor to have hosting this meeting here, as I'm an avid YouTube watcher myself of these 8-hour-long plus session meetings. So getting to witness it, I definitely made sure that my professor knew beforehand that I would be here and not in class. But I'm here particularly to register support to the augmentation of a lot of these programs and the expansion of them, not only to the money provided to them, but the efficiency of them as you further your work. Particularly, I'm here to speak on the Cal Grant reform. Not only is that one of the issues that students have a difficulty with as getting financial aid, but in the state, as you have discussed and you're about to discuss, it is one of the biggest problems systematically to students in their financial security. So that is why I want to mention that although you may have heard it all before this meeting, you're going to hear it much more after. I wanted to provide that student voice, and thank you for coming here. You made it really easy for me to do that. So. I, as student trustee, I have a lot of students who come to me. Obviously, it depends on the student who goes out there or doesn't go out there, but I do make an effort of promoting myself and going out there to all the students. And I run into a lot of students every day who have difficulties with not only the Cal program, because not a lot of students actually apply for it or are aware of it or applicable to it, but financial aid in general. As this is the legislative request for the entire system, I do want to thank you for your continued work, the legacy of your work, as you now have new board members, and I hope that your new members will obviously take this opportunity to look forward into the opportunities to investing into the students' future, especially in their financial needs. So thank you very much for all of your time. I've already spoken too much, but I do want to mention that OERs are something that we're going to be specifically trying to implement here at our campus alongside our academic faculty. Obviously, we don't speak on their behalf to their implementation, but it's something we'll be looking at because it is something that we have identified will allow us to remediate those financial needs. However, that is not the stop. That is not where we consider ourselves financially stable. So thank you very much for implementing that, but please continue your work. So thank you very much for your time and have a great day.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Yep. On the top of this next slide is our fourth priority. I think there is an interest on the part of many policymakers and an interest within our system in continuing to think about apprenticeships and other forms of work-based learning. I think as we have this conversation, it's important for us that we build on the work that has occurred through both guided pathways, but also through the Strong Workforce Program. What this request is seeking is $20 million one time and other statutes to establish broader work-based learning programs within the context of guided pathways. And then finally, we're calling this last bucket Statewide Leadership for Educational Equity. And it encompasses a few, I think, bigger picture governance challenges. The first is related to data, and we talk in our narrative about the significant challenges that we're faced in getting access to the data and sharing the data that's necessary to improve both policymaking and practice at the local level. We talk about the significant costs and barriers to entering into agreements with other segments to get access, for example, to K-12 data that could be useful to us as we continue implementation of AB 705 and guided pathways, better understanding what a student brings to our system from K-12. And then information that as we think about the types of outcomes that are important to us, information about where students go after, whether it's to UC or CSU, consistent with our Vision for Success goals around improving transfer to the four-year institutions, and also related to outcomes in the workplace. I think this is certainly something that gubernatorial candidates and major advocacy groups have made a top priority for the next year, and so we think we have something productive to contribute as part of that conversation. That second line there, I would say, I think follows up on some of the conversations that President Epstein, Member Baum, and others mentioned as part of the grants and contracts. How do we think about what the Chancellor's office does with regard to statewide leadership of statewide programs? Part of this is just additional money for our office, and so what we're requesting is $2 million for our state operations budget, largely to support additional people. But I think what we're also looking for, and what we've described here, is changes in statutes around these various what we call local assistance programs in the budget, programs where we are taking a part of what has been budgeted for programs at the colleges, allocating them through grants, contracts, other types of set-asides for statewide purposes. How can we do that in a more coordinated way that furthers the vision for success and allows for this board and this chancellor to exercise leadership in service of statewide change? Some of those are technical changes. For example, a lot of those programs are a specified percentage of a particular program that's allocated and contracted with a district in a specific way. We think in changing some of those statutes and reorganizing some of that funding, we can alleviate some of, I think, the conversations that we had earlier this afternoon as part of this board and help to further some of the goals we have. The final request here is a request that was made on behalf of a number of entities in response to or seeking to build up some capacity statewide for a library system. So The 2017-18 budget provided some funding for the planning and the initial procurement of a system of statewide library services. This would fund that contract for a period of 5 years at a total cost of $20 million. And then before we take questions, President Epstein.
Okay.
Just before we take questions, just a few comments about next steps. Again, we, with approval of the board, would produce budget change proposals. These are relatively technical forms that we transmit to the Department of Finance for each of the components of the request. We would submit those to the Department of Finance for consideration in the governor's budget. Again, typically the Department of Finance provides guidelines about the types of requests that would be considered favorably within the next year's budget, given that there is not, with a new governor, those priorities and policies could change, and so we'll be working with the new administration in November and December, and that we would use those as part of our advocacy before the legislature.
Thank you, Vice Chancellors. I just wanted to say one thing, especially for the new members here. What's reflected in this presentation are changes to our base budget that exists already, which is in the $8 billion range. Frankly, I think it would have been helpful to have included a list of what's already in the budget today, so that people would know what's being added on to. And so some of you may have questions about what the existing programs are in some of these areas that are being added to. But with that said, we'll start taking comments. I see Rawlings, Anderson, Shaw, Walker Griffin, a whole bunch, everybody. So we'll do this side first, and then we'll go to the other side. So, Member Rawlings, you were first.
Yeah. Thank you. Question on, I got a couple questions, couple comments on number one. Increasing that baseline number is part of the intention, or maybe it might be an unintended consequence. As that baseline number increases by that 5%, that will end up with fewer colleges possibly ending up in the hold harmless, or having a decline in revenue after hold harmless ends. Is that
That would
trying
be
to advance that forward, right?
I think that's maybe two intentions. One is recognizing that colleges are all facing increased operating costs that exceed cost of living adjustments in general,
Right.
and so providing additional funding on top of that. So by definition, it would, because the hold harmless is linked to the cost of living, it would bring more colleges out of that position into a higher funding rate. I think the second point that Vice Chancellor Mattoon made, but maybe to reiterate also, is kind of this desire to provide colleges with flexible money. That
Right.
growing money through the general apportionment is a way of allowing colleges with a clear set of financial incentives to figure out how best to meet the needs and to improve those outcomes.
That's great. And then two other comments. The changes to Cal Grant, I know we've talked about it before. First, I also want to say I really appreciate the new process, and I commend the Chancellor's Office staff on how early we're starting this. I mean, having served on that budget and legislative task force for a while, I know how late sometimes things seem to feel. And what it didn't allow for under the old process was a real consultative process, right? And now that we're skipping one of the committees that it might have gone through, we're taking it directly to consultation, but the dialogue there is being much more meaningful. And I know that we had conversations about the Cal Grant changes in the past that weren't really able to get advanced. And I'm really hoping we can get that across the finish line this time, primarily because I see students frequently who are food and housing insecure. And it won't be enough money to really make a big dent in the housing insecurity, but it sure as heck will make a big difference for the food insecurity, being able to improve the Cal Grant access. So I'm really hoping we can make that a priority. And then on number three, just appreciate the continued advocacy. We haven't gotten always a whole lot of support on the professional development components, but I think with the amount of changes we have going on right now, if we want classified to be able to keep up with the changes going on in the classroom, they need to be able to be trained. And that if we're developing best practices and want to share them across the system, we also need to have the ability to create an environment where we can get trained. So I think that's a fairly important item as well. So thank you.
Rochelle?
Yes, we've all sort of seen the efforts of Governor Brown and what his particular interests were in online college and bachelor's program and CTE and the rest. So do you have any inkling as to what our new governor is really focused on or interested in or leaning towards or whatever?
There's still an election, so we wait until heard.
Yeah, right.
But, part of what we designed here was a budget that we thought responded to some of the conversation that's happening among our gubernatorial candidates, particularly around data sharing, an interest in reframing workplace learning and apprenticeships, investing more money there. There's been a conversation around promise programs and what free college actually means. And I will say that our request around Cal Grant is our attempt to refocus that conversation on what our students really need, which is funding for those other costs.
Anything else?
I think apprenticeship is the other one that probably comes up frequently. Apprenticeship that I think, based on the feedback of a lot of our stakeholders, we are trying to also reframe as work-based learning. That apprenticeship is one form of this conversation, and that we should have a broader conversation about how to integrate those practices.
There is one more issue that's come up, which is around recreating as a coordinating entity that would coordinate all of our education systems. We absolutely plan to engage in that conversation. We just thought an actual proposal, it was a little premature for an actual proposal from the Board of Governors around that.
It would be a coordinating agency, you said?
What we used to have was a state agency that coordinated higher education. That was eliminated, and so there's talk
Under who?
about
Under who?
under the Governor Brown.
Oh, really? Okay.
And so there's been talk about whether it should be someone within the administration, whether it should be another agency, whether it should just be the executives of the educational entities continuing to convene as they currently do. So that, for all of those reasons, it felt a little premature for us to have a proposal on that item.
Thank you.
I will say, Member Shaw, that the Vision for Success lines up very well with whichever new governor is elected.
I know that it does.
Okay, Member Anderson, did you ask?
I just want to say I want to commend the staff for the work that you've done. You guys have put together a really comprehensive, overlook, and I think some of the new areas that you're looking at are, key and crucial to our success. I think two things that I'd like to add that, maybe you could go back and look at. One of them is because of our housing insecurity. I agree. I'm not sure what we can go ahead and do, but based on this governor's objective of 3 million units over, candidate Newsom's objective for 3 million new units over 8 years, it's the most ambitious housing goal that any governor has ever proposed. I'm not sure that we can meet that without major changes in some regulatory issues. But I do think that the community colleges can go ahead and be a partner, and we should really look at, is there incremental dollars that we could go ahead and ask for to study what are the resources that are available on our campuses, either through a statewide bond or some other things that may be coming down the pipe that the incoming governor would go ahead and propose. Secondly, if you look at, and you had a line item up there, if you read at least Lieutenant Governor Newsom's book, it's about how technology can improve all of our lives, and you had a line item up there but no corresponding number. I think coming up with a proposal, because as you know, and as Member Costa can go ahead and comment on, this is going to be a very, very quick budget that this governor and whoever he may be, needs to go ahead and put together, and I think we should be prepared with individual asks, knowing where his passions lie. So thank you for all your work.
Perfect. And maybe just one point, I think this board has traditionally adopted the request at this meeting to meet deadlines imposed by the Department of Finance. Obviously, we have a different situation this year. I think one of the things that we're going to have to continue to do as we better learn the next governor's priorities is come back to this board and potentially seek amendments or approval on advocacy points that are not included in the request. One of the things that I would just kind of frame as a overarching design or construction issue. I think we've made the points. We've made the point with legislators and with the administration previously that the community colleges today receive less on a per student basis than UC, CSU, even K-12. And so I think on new obligations, and I would put our financial aid conversation in there, but I would put conversations about housing. I think one of the points that we would strongly suggest to you all is that we shouldn't advocate as this coming from within that Proposition 98 pie, that if we are going to assume additional obligations, or if the legislature and the governor are going to create new obligations, we think that budgeting those separately from those existing from that existing funding is an important design principle.
Can be done.
Let's give other people a chance. Member Walker Griffin.
Thank you, President Epstein, and thank you, Vice Chancellors, for the lovely presentation. So I have more so a comment than a question. Now, I understand that with this budget cycle, they're trying to be a breakaway from like the whole, I guess you will, tunnels, and having tunnel vision of who we want to predominantly focus on. But considering that this is focusing on a lot of student equity, I think that there are some demographics that are a little bit overlooked that we should be focusing on a little bit more. For example, students who are in the foster care system, also students who are in ESL programs, and even students with a dead parent. I can personally speak to that because my father passed away actually only 8 weeks into my very first year of college. And then also students with learning disabilities and LGBT students. The reason why I say this is because they're more larger scope and containing more demographics and can contain more minorities. But from what I've personally seen, and maybe others on the board can address this too, they tend to be lower performing because they have some sort of disadvantage. Maybe an LGBT student doesn't have parents or family that'll support them. Having a dead parent can mean that the person, for example, my mom, has to put in a little bit more effort to do what she needs to do to help her out and help my family out as a whole, leaving sort of a vacancy. So I just wanted to echo those concerns that I have.
We take everybody else for start at that end.
It'll come as
our
no
budget
surprise. I
expert,
have a
yeah.
lot of questions about the budget, so I already warned Vice Chancellor Osmeña. First, I just want to kind of ground myself in the numbers a little bit. I want to understand how the 5% number was derived for the student-centered formula. I'm assuming it's a COLA, but I don't know what index you used. And I'd also like to better understand the $1.5 billion figure for the Cal Grant reform and whether or not that's just the community college portion. Is that across all segments? And what exactly is behind that number?
So to start on the first question, we would say this is separate from the COLA. So we would expect that there is still a COLA. Admittedly, we didn't use an index here. So I think what we're saying is, this 5% number was, similar to the magnitude of the requests that we've made previously with regard to general operating expenses. And the goal here is to really say this is kind of the top priority that, and kind of, jargony, using jargon, this would be our balancer that we would say, we have a set of smaller Proposition 98 requests. Our top priority and the, would be this. And so, the biggest portion and what we would be adjusted based on the size of the guarantee would be this funding rates for the student success funding formula.
I just have to say as a comment, I think we're in a much better position if we have a number, whether it's CPI or something that we are tagging this to, something that we can explain. Finance will ask, Christian,
Sounds good. And we'll think through that.
And then on the Cal Grant, the amount comes from a number of reports that were conducted by the LAO, by the Century Foundation on contract with the Student Aid Commission, and it essentially is a reformatting of the Cal Grant, where we would, instead of looking at what we currently look at, what is your GPA, are you within 2 years of high school graduation, what are your income and assets, are you at that ceiling, this would completely reform the program to look at really two factors. What is the total cost of attendance and what is your need? And what's the difference between those two numbers? Every student would have an estimated self-help amount, and then the difference between that self-help amount and what their need is would be the responsibility of the state. When you factor the financial aid program that way, most of these dollars, not the full 1.5 billion, but the vast majority of them would go to community college students because of how the current system is structured.
Who else? Member Grande?
Thank you. I want to applaud the Pathways to Community College Teaching Pilot Program and the Work-Based Learning call-outs in these budget proposal. But I want to focus on the extension of the Cal Grant, especially the notation that was made about extending it to all certificate and degree programs, regardless of whether or not they're oriented to transfer or four-year universities or to careers. How do we reconcile that with the student-centered funding formula that gives us incentives for productivity measures, and yet this would extend out the ability for students to pursue non-ADT, non-career-related certificates?
Just to be clear here, this item was, or this request was meant to focus on, right now we have 3 different Cal Grant programs, and there's 2 different sort of timelines required, right? If you get a Cal Grant B, it's programs of greater than 1 year up to 4 years. Cal Grant C is programs 4 months to 2 years. And so what we were trying to say is that community college programs are being supported in their value through other mechanisms like the Student Success Funding Formula, like the Strong Workforce Program, and that the Student Aid Commission as a separate entity doesn't need to regulate the quality of the community college programs this way, that if it's one of our programs that's being funded, that's being supported, the student should be eligible to receive a grant for the timeline associated with their program.
And just maybe to the link to the student-centered funding formula, that I think these are both rowing in the same direction, that the student-centered funding formula provides colleges with additional resources based on success of students in a variety of degree programs, degree and certificate programs, including short-term certificates, 16 units or greater, and then also recognizes career technical education pathways that are 9 units or greater. So we see this as consistent with those reforms.
Don?
I too want to applaud the Vice Chancellors and others involved in this process for assembling a rather bold budget proposal. And I think most notable is the item number 2, the Cal Grant. I think if we can actually win this with the new governor, whoever it may be, it's a big win for our students. So maybe, Amy, you could shed some light on how it works internally, probably not today, but as we proceed, because I think that's a big item in my view. And the second is to actually foster a growing conversation, if you will, amongst the 3 segments of higher education to push for further crossing the lanes, if you will, as we discussed recently at a gathering that the governor's staff had called for. And a third item, probably a minor question, is as I was counting up the numbers, I think there will be probably 7 or 8 statewide leadership positions created if all of these items are funded, and then the additional staffing to the Chancellor's office. So I suppose that all of these will be housed at the Chancellor's office if granted, and would that be an additional 15, 20, or 30 person augmentation to the staff of the Chancellor's office, or? Curious.
Yes, so I think we're talking in the ballpark of around 20 positions. One of the intent here is to begin to suggest that, in the past when we've created new programs, we have not been given or we haven't requested. It's some combination of the 2 additional staffing for those to administer those programs. I think there's a strong emphasis as part of this request, and I think you'll see a strong emphasis from our office that we need to begin to recognize that in order to provide the capacity to support achieving the vision for success, that takes some people at the Chancellor's office, and we need to have a systematic way in which we are making that case as part of every request that we make, that we shouldn't ignore that part of the program because we think it will make the overall reform less viable, that as long as we're consistent with the message, we think that that's a good way of moving forward.
I also want to talk about the Cal Grant B program a little bit. So can you help me understand this a little more? is it a defined budget or a defined pool so that if we get more money, that means there's less money for CSU and UC?
We're requesting an additional investment. So we are, if this reform happened without an additional investment, there would be implications for other student populations. And that's not what we're asking for. We're asking for an additional investment that would be focused in a reform that would provide equity to better serve our students.
So we're not asking to re-architect the current process. We're just saying if there is additional investment, that architect it this way, or are we asking to change the current funding structure of Cal Grant B?
We're asking to change the structure of the Cal Grant program with these priorities, and that will cost more money, right? UC and CSU students already have many, not all of their costs paid for, either through Cal Grant or campus-based aid plus Pell. Our students don't have that same level of investment, so you would see similar grant amounts for students who are currently receiving those awards within those systems, and then you'd see increased grant amounts for students in our system.
Okay.
Maybe to add also to that point, I think there are a number of ways you can get to a program that looks like the principles that we've articulated. Right now, the state largely budgets the Cal Grant program as an entitlement program, and so it looks at who meets the current entitlement criteria, how much would it cost to provide grants of a particular size to those students. So I think you are creating costs in a few different ways by making the types of changes we're talking about. We're saying we need to entitle more students, and those students are largely the students that we serve, the non-traditional students, students who have entered college more than a year after high school. So if you are providing an entitlement to those students, you're building that into the baseline cost of the program. And then we're saying the grant sizes need to be larger generally for the students that we serve. That right now, the highest grant goes to UC students, about $12,000, linked to tuition. CSU students, depending on their particular circumstances, either get tuition of about $6,000 or a $1,600 access award plus tuition. And so we're saying the students who aren't getting high grant amounts today are the community college students, and so you grow that. So I think the one way to think of it is kind of thinking about we're changing the way in which the state calculates that baseline cost of the Cal Grant program.
Isn't it also true that for-profit college students get much larger grants than we do?
Under the Cal Grant system, most of for-profit colleges were eliminated from the program because they failed to meet quality standards. And then their maximum grant amount was reduced to $4,000. But it's true in the federal student aid program that a significant amount of money is going to for-profit colleges.
First off, I want to express my appreciation to the Chancellor, because for the first time I see on slide 6 a clear articulation of the criteria by which decisions were made to incorporate into this, and it's very helpful to see that and to be able to share that. And that it also said that they should budget requests should align with board policies adopted by the Board of Governors, and I think that's very helpful. And maybe to build off Member Rawlings' point too, demographic trends are showing that the population of students is shrinking. So how do we account for, because growth has been such a significant driver of budget making, and then on the same token, because the economy is doing well, that we may have fewer students, but we know the economy may not be doing so well a year from now, and how do we build in the capacity so that we can have that surge capability, just like emergency responders, when that emergency hits?
Yeah, so I think to the first question, the place where enrollment fits in, or where the demographics fit into enrollment, is largely in estimates of the workload budget of how much it would cost to fund the apportionment as it's funded today. There's not a specific recommendation for growth in this budget, and so I think what we're suggesting is a high priority is kind of implementing the formula and growing resources to fund discretionary costs of the district. To the second question, and there might be additional answers here, additional perspective. I think it's a hard way. We struggle to deal with the counter-cyclical part of our budgeting. That when state funds decrease, that's often when community college enrollment surges. I think one thing that we are thinking that is separate from the budget is that we need to do a better job of thinking about community college districts' financial health. That part of this conversation is reserves, how districts are using money in these relatively good times to enable continued capacity in downturns. And so I think that's a conversation that our office is beginning to think about of how do we support colleges in those decisions.
And I think we could highlight some of the really important investments the legislature and the governor have made in the Strong Workforce Program, in the online college. Really, these are targeted at trying to help colleges better understand what workforce programs are doing a good job of helping students be prepared for high-wage, high employment opportunity jobs in their regions. And if we've rolled this out correctly, then colleges should know, based on the data we've been able to provide them, which of their programs are really resulting in those opportunities for adult learners. And so they'll know when it comes time to restructure based on whatever happens in the economy, which programs really are serving the needs of their communities.
And one last response here. The Oversight Committee that I mentioned earlier, one of its specific charges is looking at how would you adjust the apportionment in the case of a downturn. And so I think we're going to have that conversation through that vehicle also.
And then my last question is, just as one of the students mentioned, the EOP&S program's important to her. We know that there are no categorical funding for programs anymore. It's more at the discretion of each school. But how do we also ensure that we want to make sure that there's a robust funding for veterans programs, for EOP&S, for other things that would have previously come under a categorical...
And to President Epstein's point, I think here is where looking at the base budget would have been helpful. So what we're showing you here is the incremental parts of the budget, but there remains existing base funding for programs like EOP&S. And so I think the message of the request is that we don't do anything to those baseline budgets, but that moving forward, new investments should be provided through the Student Equity and Achievement Program, which we think provides districts and colleges with additional flexibility to analyze what their students need and to provide interventions that reflect that analysis.
One of the requirements of that program is that colleges do their own equity look, right? They must conduct a data-based evaluation, identify equity needs, and then identify how they will invest funds to close equity gaps. And this, the Student Equity and Achievement Program allows them to invest funding in the ways that they need in order to close those achievement gaps. It absolutely would be at a college's discretion to use that funding towards veterans. We may have this separate categorical focused on veterans, but if they identify additional need, they could use their Student Equity and Achievement Program dollars that way. Similarly with EOPS. I think what our proposal is saying is that the folks best positioned to determine what those needs are and what programs are working are the colleges locally, and then to invest the dollars appropriately.
If I can add, Member Baum, at the end of the day, what we want to do with the base increase is provide an increase to per student funding. And we want to recognize that now is the time to do that, now that we've had changes to the funding formula, now we see plateauing of enrollment throughout the system, and by some projections we may see a decline. However, we have to recognize that our students are still funded at some of the lowest rates in the country, and we have to continue to strive to put those dollars at colleges where they can best be used to support our students. So that is part of the drive. What we're doing is building a policy framework around that, which is what the Board of Governors has been doing to ensure that those funds go to support students in a way that we can also build an accountability framework. So it is something that we want to recognize that the 114 colleges know best how to serve their students. We want to provide the flexibility for the funding. We want to provide as much per student funding that we can available to them, and we want to build a framework of accountability for student outcomes. And we're going to try to build that 3 or 4-legged stool along the way as we go forward. And hopefully that will also help buffer against a recession, as well as the work that the governor and finance have done to fund the rainy day fund, which would hopefully buffer a minor recession. I don't know what it could do to a major recession, but those are the different ways that we're looking at this.
Member Perry.
I just add my voice to the growing chorus of applause for your looking at the calculation. I don't think it can be said enough times our pillars is access. And I have the moral obligation to address every avenue to increase that access. So thank you. And anything I can do in my non-BOG capacity to help move that forward, please let me know, because I know it's a bit of a stretch, and I'm happy to do whatever I can.
And the first comment by member Zaragoza.
Well, I just wanted to express my gratitude as well on behalf of myself and also the students. It's been a long fight, and it still is a fight to get more funding, especially because, you know, in order to help students get, you know, become full-time, that kind of thing, they out on these additional grants, but the fact is most of us can't even access them in the first place. And so, you know, I really hope that this does work out well, but I'm happy that we've gotten this far and that, you know, just in my first meeting, this was the first thing on my list of things that we needed, and the fact that it's already being, you know, things are being done to try to change that. Thank you.
Okay, we're up for round two. Member Shaw. No, your question has been answered.
I'm out.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes. Costa.
One, I just want to note that I wish that there was a little bit more for faculty diversity in the plan, candidly. I think it's a great idea, it's a needed idea, but we have some tremendous work to do, and $15 million, I just know, is not going to quite get us there. Secondly, I'd like to hear a little bit more in the last bucket about the changes in statute around various local assistance programs, and I'd like to hear you speak a little bit more about that.
Perfect. On that first part, I would just note that I think one of the ways, one of the benefits of the additional resources has been under our current regulations, districts are required to grow the number of full-time faculty that they have commensurate with growth in the number of credit enrollment that they achieve. And I think one thing that the Chancellor has been especially clear to all of the groups he's talked to about is that as we see additional full-time faculty, this is the opportunity to improve diversity. So I think we're doing a lot of work in that area. I think on the changes in statutes around various local assistance programs, we need to have further conversations as part of the consultative process. But I think, again, this is a place that, in listening to this board at prior meetings, and in reflecting on conversations that our office has had, I think there is a strong belief that the way we structure the various types of statewide activities that we administer is suboptimal, that it's not coordinated around a vision for success. It involves oftentimes complicated grant and contract monitoring. It doesn't allow us to determine the types of resources, what would be most optimal to achieve the tasks that we've identified. And so I think the current structure largely is each of our categorical programs, or many of our categorical programs, allow us to use some of the money for statewide activities. That is currently administered usually through a fiscal agent of a district, or using a district as a fiscal agent. Those are often different districts, and so we are complying with policies and protocols of many different districts, often to do similar things. That often it is, if we were doing this in an optimal way, we would be using all of those funds on activities that further the vision for success through the Guided Pathways framework. And so I think we need to have a conversation about, part of that is administrative, and I think we need to figure out administratively how we can better coordinate it. But I think this also involves us figuring out how we might change some of those statutes to allow us some additional flexibility to better integrate those efforts.
Okay, we have quite a few public comments. Vice President Haynes.
Thank you. The first speaker is Omar Huela. Has he gone? Oh, there he is. Okay.
President Epstein, Chancellor Oakley, and honorable board members, welcome to, this is my college, Southwestern College. This is my home, it's been my home for 20 years now. So very happy to see you here. I'm the president of the Eops Association. I'm also the director of Eops here at Southwestern College. We serve over 2,400 students every year, and we're one of the largest programs in the state. EOPS targets helping the most economically and academically disadvantaged students in the community college system. In line with the vision for success, EOPS students acquire associate's degrees, credentials, certificates, or specific skills sets to prepare them for the workforce. We also ensure that students take only the necessary classes to complete their major. That is, our students do not accumulate unnecessary units while attending community college. EOPS assists in reducing equity gaps among underrepresented student groups. We serve a diverse student population, including first generation, single parents, welfare to work recipients, veterans, English language learners, foster youth, Dreamers or AB 540, reentry students, formerly incarcerated, poor or low income, working poor, and the list goes on and on. For 49 years, EOPS has helped thousands of students navigate and successfully complete college. In 2012, the RP Group analyzed the effectiveness of EOPS, finding that students in this program outperform non-EOPS students on nearly all outcomes: retention, persistence, unit load, and attainment of certificates and associate's degrees. Although the EOPS program received funding restoration in 2015, every year we turn away hundreds of students across the state because the programs lack sufficient funding. We humbly ask for your support with a budget increase of $10 million to allow the programs across the state to help even more students succeed. Please consider adding the $10 million to the budget change proposal. The $10 million will allow the programs to address this backlog of surpassing 100,000 students served annually. This year, we served 97,000 students across the state. Thank you for your continued support, and I also want to thank the students that spoke earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Valerie Johnson. And then the speaker after that will be Matt Wettstein.
Good afternoon, President Epstein, Vice President Haynes, Chancellor Oakley, and members of the board. My name is Valerie Johnson, and I serve as the Vice President of System Affairs for the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. And I am here today as a representative of the organization to voice our support for these legislative and budget policies, specifically as they regard the Cal Grants and the efforts to diversify faculty and staff. As far as the Cal Grants, the current Cal Grants focus on tuition means that community college students are not identifying with much. They don't really consider outside tuition costs, so these efforts to go ahead and address those outside tuition costs are something that we are in great support of, and we commend you for your work on them and look forward to seeing them implemented. And then as far as the efforts to diversify faculty, this has been one of our priorities for a very long time, and we're really excited to see that the Board of Governors and the Chancellor's Office are making efforts to diversify our faculty, because when students see people that look like them in positions of power, it motivates, and it's really encouraging, and we believe that it lends to success. So to be able to see that diversity in faculty and staff on campus and throughout the administration, we believe is a really good priority, and we're really looking forward to seeing that implemented. And that's just about it for the Student Senate, but thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm also going to call Ari Rakesa up as well.
Thank you, President Epstein and members of the board. I actually have written, written comments that are going to reflect the old president of the board, so my apologies for that. My name is Matt Wettstein. I'm the president of Cabrillo College, and I'm here to support the budget and legislative request that's been put in front of you today. I have 3 points that I want to focus on and speak from 3 themes. One is gratitude. The second is the importance of inquiry and analysis. And the third is in highlighting the need for continuous improvement. So let me focus on gratitude. As Cabrillo's president, I serve more than 17,000 students in the Santa Cruz County region. And many of those students are the first in the family to attend college. They are confronted with struggles of poverty, or near poverty in one of the most expensive places to live in the world. I'm pleased to see that Chancellor Oakley and his staff are requesting 5% increases in funding for all of the components of the funding formula. This is a recognition that the 2.71% COLA is not enough to provide to colleges under the new funding formula to cover the escalating costs of operating a comprehensive community college. And I suggest that that 5% figure might be used to look at where that would lift us up to within the ranks of states, or to see how it reflects where we were before the recession hit as a barometer that might be used. Additionally, I'm grateful that the board and the Chancellor's office are calling for reforms in the Cal Grant program to ensure that our students get access to more aid as they seek to complete their studies. Recent research by the legislature has shown that students attending our colleges pay higher net costs than students who attend CSU and UC campuses. So recognizing this fact, I'm very grateful for the system leadership's advocacy for the increased Cal Grant awards. So let me turn to the second part of my comments, which focus on the importance of inquiry into the implementation of the funding formula and the importance of making revisions to ensure that significant funding gaps do not get solidified as a result of the new model. In the attachments that I've distributed with my comments, I have two charts and arguments to make to the Board of Governors on this matter. The first is to indicate that under the new funding formula's hold harmless provisions, a large contingent of districts in the system will receive only 2.71% in funding. When that gets extrapolated to a per FTEs basis under the new model, there are wide disparities in funding that exist across the colleges. I'm going to jump ahead through my prepared comments so that I don't exceed the 3 minutes, but I'll leave those written comments to you. But the main concerns I want to raise with you about the funding formula and the need for study and review are that the funding formula does not address the cost of living variations that exist across our districts. It is quite different to operate a college and to be a student attending a college where the rents and mortgages are the highest in the country and the fourth highest in the world than it is to live in the Central Valley or other parts of the state. The current formula does not adjust for those factors. It also does not adjust for the demographic differences across our colleges. Many of our districts serve large concentrations of retirees and students over the age of 50. In San Francisco, that can be as high as 25% of the student body. Those students are not going to pursue degrees, certificates, or transfer to four-year institutions, but they contribute value to our state and to our community and to our cultural enrichment as a state. And I would please ask you to consider that those students are as important to our population as all students. But finally, I want to come back to the point of gratitude and the recognition by the Chancellor and the Chancellor's staff to make continuous improvement in the funding formula. This is envisioned in the legislation with the Oversight Committee. Clearly, the legislature saw that there would need to be tweaks. We think at our college that those tweaks need to be made very soon. Because if we don't make them, we will see inequities persist across the districts throughout the state. But I want to end my comments by saying that I'm thankful to the Chancellor and his staff for being open to new ideas, for their willingness to advocate for 5% increases in funding for our system, for advocating for financial aid reforms that help our students in their pursuit of upward social mobility. And I'm humbled to work alongside them in their efforts. And I encourage all of you to support the budget and legislative priorities document. Thank you.
Thank you, President Wettstein.
Good afternoon. My name is Arlie Ricasa, and I'd like to thank you all and really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, Mr. President, Ms. Vice President, Chancellor Oakley, and governing board members and staff. As I mentioned, I am a resident who was born and raised here in the South County, so welcome. You're in probably the best jewel of this state. I know you all think you all are from. But I wanted to just spend a couple minutes just to say that as an employee as well, not only as someone who's born and raised here, but as an employee of this district for the past 28 years, I hope I can provide a little bit of an insight as you look at your budget and the approach that you've been taking. And I really do appreciate all of you in terms of, I'd say, really progressive stands and kinds of changes that you've been approaching with California community colleges. But being a product of back in the days of Senator D.D. Albert and the Master Plan of Education, how much it's changed here in California and what we're now up against, that I would just ask that you continue, as you're looking forward to our students, to be cautious. I know that the terminology that's been used and what's been discussed today, such as local control, is an important thing, especially for those governing members here at the variety of districts. But having seen what's happened in K through 12, it really depends on who is leading those particular sites. It depends on who is governing that board in order to make sure the decisions of categorical programs such as EOPS, DSPNS, CalWorks, Foster Youth, those kinds of programs are protected, because decisions are made at the local level that truly are important to the people they're serving. But we also have to ensure that things are in place to protect and make sure that those funding sources are still available. So when programs like EOPS come forward and ask for additional funding, it truly is because we're doing fantastic work. Success that you all are focused on for our students is what we've been carrying out for about 50 years. So I just ask that you continue to look at that, to just be aware of that when you make a change to how the choices for funding and resources are made, whether it be local or through you,
30
that we
seconds.
have the ability to make sure things are held accountable for our students. Because at the end of the day, for myself, not only as an employee, but a mother of 5 kids, now raising kids here, and of the 3rd generation of family members who've attended this college, I want to ensure that success continues. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Michelle Sepulveda, and then after that, Adam Wetzman.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. My name is Michelle Sepulveda. I'm also an EOPS counselor. As a whole, EOPS is asking for an additional $10 million to adequately fund our program. We at Southwestern College have one of the highest enrollments, and therefore we have one of the highest needs for our students. And we're consistently having to turn away students due to lack of funds. So what are they missing out on? That's the biggest question, and I could say that they're missing out on your vision of success. We as EOPS counselors have been following this over and above model all along. We've been doing it for a long time. We've been guiding students' pathways. That's our motto. We've been doing it for almost 50 years. So I'd just like to share with you that we're in line and we're with the program. Making steps clear and graduating students promptly is what we do. It's our goal every day. The students that spoke earlier, I have the pleasure of hearing those stories in my office every day and hearing how much we're able to do for our students and through our program in itself and through all of the access that we tend to provide students as far as other resources go on campus as well. For these reasons, this is why we have the highest amount of CTE students across the state. We have one of the highest levels of retention, and we have the highest number of students completing degree at applicable units. Not to mention, we're a catalyst for providing access to all of other services that our diverse population deserves. We thank you for your time and your consideration and these additional funds that we're requesting to continue to support students above and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then after Adam Wetzman, John Stanskas.
Good afternoon. Welcome, new board members, newer board members, new board leadership, and everybody else. My name's Adam Wetzman. I'm a full-time anthropology professor at Rio Hondo College. I'm on our academic senate, and actually I'm our negotiations chair. We're starting negotiations, and was recently at one of the Guided Pathways Institute. In my free time, I'm the president of FAC, the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges, the 10,000 plus statewide professional membership association that advocates for faculty and has members across all 114, soon to be 115 campuses, we hope, in the state. I'd like to start by thanking the Chancellor's Office for really engaging Consultation Council to a very good extent when it came to developing these budget change proposals. We think these are great. Couple things that I'd like to point out. One is that I want to echo what's been said about the EOP&S program. We know that this has a great track record and can lead to increased chances for success for students who really face some of the most difficult challenges when it comes to being successful. So we hope that we can increase the budget request for EOP&S in here. I want to talk about the augmentations to the faculty areas here, most notably number 3, including support for educational professionals. All of these things are really wonderful. We need more professional development, not only for faculty, but also for classified staff, because they have the same kind of contact that faculty do with the students, and they can lead to great levels of success for the students, and so we need to do that. Increasing funding for faculty is essential. In the last several months, we have provided you research that has supported that view, especially for full-time faculty. But the thing is that in our system, when a student walks into a classroom, there's something like a 40% chance that that student has a part-time faculty member. And that faculty member is as dedicated to the students as everybody else in the system, but that faculty member might have to hop in his or her car and drive to another campus, might have to go and work a different job outside of education, might be living in his or her car, and doesn't have the same kind of ability to provide as much support as full-time faculty. So we need to improve, number one, the number of full-time faculty. $50 million is good, but it should be much higher. We need to up that fund. The Chancellor's office has asked for a slew of new full-time people to work in the office. We need that too for our students. We also applaud this pilot program for increasing diversity. This pathway to teaching is great. But remember, that student who comes into my classroom and says, this is an awesome instructor, I want to do that. In fact, I want to replace this instructor. That's going to take at least 6 years. So it's going to take some time to do that. We need to ensure that this is just the beginning, not the ending. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, President Epstein, Vice President Haynes, and Chancellor Oakley. For the new board members in Sacramento, there's actually a little card that says, say this every time you speak at the front on this side of the aisle. So it's not here. I'm glad I remembered it. I just wanted to say a couple things about the budget request. And the first one is a big thank you to the Chancellor's Office staff for really reimagining the process by which suggestions come from the field and they're considered, and the engagement of Consultation Council. I've been going to Consultation Council now for 3.5 years, and that's the first time that's happened. And I really felt like that was a really good process, and I appreciate that opportunity. I did want to speak specifically to the pilot program to improve faculty diversity. That was originally a draft that was approved in 2015 by the Academic Senate, the Chief Instructional Officers, the Chief Student Services Officers, the group that represents the Human Resources and Business Officers, and the Chancellor's Office, really looking at a program by which colleges would be able to design a program looking at the most diverse population they have at their disposal, which is their students, and figuring out how to track and move them all the way through back to a teaching position, either through graduate school or industry, depending upon the qualifications for that program. I did have a concern about the number of requests for positions of state leadership, particularly around request number 3, improved quality through support for education professionals. Every college and district has a professional development committee that is responsible for understanding the needs of their faculty and staff and providing that, and I'm not sure what those positions would do. most of the programs that we have seen models of about grow your own really are dependent on geography. And I have trouble seeing how any of those would
30
be
seconds.
Best served through a centralized model. 20 additional chancellor's office positions is a lot of positions, and I know you have lots of work to do. But when 56% of our classes are taught by full-time faculty, I'm wondering if that's where we want to ask for funding, and centering that on positions in the chancellor's office. So just a word of caution to be careful about how many positions and what they would do. Thank you.
Okay,
Stand at the speaker.
I think that's it. I think we're ready to accept a motion here.
I'll move.
Member Perry and Member Rawlings. All in favor of adopting this budget?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. On to the simple process of the 5-year capital outlay plan that I'm sure you're going to present to us as expeditiously as possible.
We are.
Yes,
And,
emphasis on expeditiously for the rest of the vice chancellors coming forward.
Yeah.
Sounds good. And so we have a slide deck. I will run through most of it quickly. I want to introduce Carlos Montoya, who's the director of the Facilities Planning Unit. So
An award.
essentially, we'll walk through capital outlay very quickly, talk about our 5-year request, and then next steps. This slide is in here to suggest that the task that you are embarking on this item is essentially the same task that you were embarking on the last item, but with regard to capital outlay. Capital outlay, and I got a reputation a while ago for having a lot of interest in capital outlay, but mostly because I asked a lot of questions because it never made a lot of sense to me. But essentially what you're trying to figure out is what is the infrastructure, the buildings and space needed to meet your program needs. And your program should drive the space needs, not vice versa. And so when we think about this, we're often thinking about changes in enrollment, growth, what are the facilities needed with new students. But I just wanted to highlight here that when we think about infrastructure needs today, we're also thinking about changes in college design consistent with guided pathways, new instructional modes, online education, competency-based education that we spend a lot of time talking about, and increasingly stronger alignment across the systems. And so what we're talking about is a program overall that's funded by some state funds, more local funds, and then some other sources like gifts and donations. So you have 2 documents in this item. One is the 5-year capital outlay plan, which is kind of an overarching set of needs that would be funded by a variety of, by any of these sources over the next 5 years. So it's a document of kind of college needs and district needs. You also are approving the request for 1920. So that is specifically which part of that request would you want state funds for. Capital outlay is really a state term that is used to distinguish it from state operations and local assistance. So in the last item, you approved our request for state operations and local assistance. This item, because the state budgets for them separately, we request money for buildings separately. It's kind of messy, and you'll, if you went on the tour today, I think you would have seen that there's hard distinctions between certain areas. Maintenance is one that often feels like a bit of both. New capital drives additional maintenance, and maintenance, depending on how bad it's gotten, can sometimes be something that's eligible for capital outlay funding. And so historically, the state has budgeted for capital outlay needs in a variety of ways. The most prominent for our system has been state general obligation bonds. We've also seen lease revenue bonds, where essentially the state is appropriating funds to pay the rents on the building, and other funds. And sometimes it just appropriates funding specifically for programs. I think one thing to note here, we'll talk about Proposition 51, enacted or passed by voters in 2016, which authorized about $2 billion in general obligation bonds for community college districts. In addition to that authority to issue the bonds, we also need appropriations for specific projects, and appropriations are made in the annual budget process. Last part here that I think is important, we use, essentially the state uses a zero-based budgeting approach. So there's no funding that's rolled over from prior years. We start from a place where there's no funding for the projects, and we have to make our case for funding for different phases of projects. So 3 things that we'll talk about here: total amount of need, total amount of the request, and how we prioritized. So again, the 5-year plan describes the total need. It's a plan we're required to produce by a variety of statutes. This chart essentially is pulled from that plan that says, in thinking about new facilities and modernization of existing facilities, we're projecting of a need for that 5-year period of about $30 billion, far in excess of what we would expect the available funding to be. So our request is largely driven by kind of a framework that, around Proposition 51. The proposition authorized $2 billion. When this office did initial planning around it, said if you spent it over 4 years, you'd need about $500 million per year. So then the process that our office goes through is figuring out how do we take that $30 billion and prioritize it into a request that can be funded with $400 million a year. So essentially, we receive requests from districts through a capital outlay budget change proposal process and a project proposal process. So for the projects that you are looking at as part of this plan, for the 1920 spending plan, we received the proposals in July of 2017, so more than a year ago. It goes through a review process that involves scoring that we'll talk about for inclusion in this plan. So we have essentially 6 categories of projects, and we say, first priority, fire and life safety projects.
Can you kind of
speed it
cut
up
to the chase? Yeah.
Yep. So what we've got, we went through a prioritization process, and so attachment B, I believe, in your agenda is the projects that we included. So we included 19 continuing projects. So these were projects where first phases of the project were included in prior budgets. This is funding largely construction and equipment. And then 39 new projects. And the $48 million there largely funds preliminary plans and working drawings. So we'll submit this to the Department of Finance. Again, we don't know their priorities, and so we don't know exactly how that'll be received. But we'll continue to work with the administration, the new administration, and the legislature. Happy to take questions.
Yes, Member Costa.
I'm just curious, when was the last time that the board reviewed our prioritization buckets? And the reason I say that is because it's very heavily focused on enrollment growth. We talked earlier today about enrollment possibly declining. And I am troubled by the fact that our academic support facilities are ranked last, below complete campus. And I would really encourage us as a board to review that and flip the script going forward.
I think we agree, and I don't know if the Chancellor wants to talk further, but one of the things, these were priorities adopted a number of years ago with old bond funds. And so Director Montoya and I have started conversations with system stakeholders about changing the priorities. I think we should have a conversation about how we change capital funding altogether, that I think in an environment where a lot of the emphasis is on kind of integrating around guided pathways, that I think the way in which we prioritize or prioritize among a great need, given local funding, also is important.
Okay, Member Walker Griffin.
Thank you, President Epstein. There's one particular item here that I really want to highlight that some of my constituents in Merced reached out to me and wanted me to note, and that is the Agricultural Science and Industrial Technologies Complex. As we know, the Central Valley produces most of our vegetables and fruits and things of that nature, and it's vital to their economy that they still have people who can continuously support that economy. In addition to that, because of climate change and a bunch of other factors, it can be difficult, and in some places slowly becoming impossible to have food and to just be able to produce things like strawberries and things of that nature. So I just wanted to echo to the board that if there's one particular item that I really hope that you're in favor of, it's this one, so that way we can keep California rolling and help people get new jobs, because we all know that the Central Valley is one of the most impoverished areas in the state of California, and if you've ever drove through Merced, you can totally see it.
Thank you, Member Rawlings.
Thank you, President Epstein.
Kind of building on Amy's comment there, taking a look at the prioritization and where student service capacity falls, I think is important in maybe reviewing that. But I think one of the things that stood out to me, and maybe Jolena as well, is seeing San Bernardino Valley College's technology building on here. If that building is indicative of projects that are under Category B, then I really hope we can keep those fairly high, because that instructional space, there's no way that instructional space is meeting the needs of the economy out in that region at the scale that they need it. They're doing their dangest to make it work. But when you've only got a handful of students that can work on a piece of equipment at a time, and you can't actually teach a whole class at once, that's really a challenge. So I'm really glad to see San Bernardino's project on here, and I'm hoping that these other colleges aren't quite as hard off as they are with this project.
And maybe just to kind of highlight a conversation for future discussion, that I think the categorization is challenging in a kind of a world of guided pathways, that what really counts as instructional space versus support space.
Right.
How do we think about just the variety of uses, similar to the kind of the conversations we had as we toured the campus here today. So I think we plan to bring before you some considerations around changing categories, changing prioritization, changing this process moving forward.
Okay, Member Fawn?
I know that our current governor is pretty conservative or frugal in the spending of money for facilities. Of the $2 billion that was passed, I think 2 or 3 years ago, how much has it been expended? I'm curious.
I believe it's so far with projects including the 19 continuing, so the construction equipment phase, I think about 550, 60, right around there, has been allocated. Now with the 39 new projects, we have about 1.2 billion out of the 2 billion, both funded as well as proposed so far.
And I think in previous years, our system, and in collaboration with the CCFC, submitted a rather longer list of activities or projects to be funded, but I think it got slashed to only 6, and then down to up to 9, and then 15 and other stuff. Do you anticipate that moving forward, also in kind of the reduction when it gets to DOF or the governor's office?
I think hard to tell. So the Department of Finance has provided the same kind of generic feedback that until a new administration takes office, the types of requests that would be considered are going to be relatively minimal.
Okay, Member Baum?
So I just want to be clear. So what we're going to be doing is adding new projects to our existing existing list of continuing projects in the capital outlay plan.
Technically, because capital outlay is funded on a zero-based basis, we have to readjust, or we have to submit new requests for new phases of projects. So you'll see on the attachment to new and continuing in that first column, which the continuing, that C phase, refers to construction, and then new is largely planning and working drawings.
And this is all, we're able to do this because for a long time we didn't have anything to really authorize because there was no bonded.
So these would all be Proposition 51 bond funds.
Yep.
And then in the future, could you envision a statewide infrastructure capital investment project, whether it's for data infrastructure or data security too, and perhaps that would be part of the online college system, but I don't know.
I think that's something we haven't probably seriously put pen to paper on a proposal like that, but happy to continue to talk. Yeah.
Okay. There's no public comment. Do we have a motion? Yeah. Member Zaragoza?
I was just going to comment that in regards to all of these, that for students especially, something as simple as a building renovation can extremely change our feeling about the campus. I know we recently went through a whole bunch of renovations, and suddenly all the students are staying there all day, and it really keeps students engaged on campus. For some, it might be a building that they previously did not have for their field of study, and they can also expand resources as well. So I'm just putting that out there.
Okay, great. So we need a
move to approve.
Move to approve. Mr. Rawlings. Board Member Molly. Second, Member Grande. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we've already done 2.7. Let's do 2.8. And Vice Chancellor Mattoon.
I have a PowerPoint, but I'm going to begin just because I know we're on a bit of a time crunch and I want to allow my speakers time to present. So this item is asking for the Board of Governors to vote to support a resolution that would declare October 15th through 19th as Undocumented Student Week of Action. You'll recall that last September, President Trump took action to rescind DACA. At that time, we had an advocacy week where we encouraged colleges to go meet with their elected congressional leaders and talk to them about the importance of DACA, particularly for community college students. At that time, we did not expect that we would be having another week this year. And unfortunately, we are. We'll be having another week of action calling both in terms of asking our congressional members to take explicit actions to provide a sense of security for these students that are left in limbo, as well as we're expanding this week of action to focus on some advocacy activities that, or some support services that our colleges could explicitly take to provide support to our undocumented student population as well as their families. This slide just mentions the main partners for this project: the Community College League of California, the Student Senate, FAC, the Foundation, and Immigrants Rising are our key partners. There's a number of other supporters across our system. This is the resolution resolve clauses. I just wanted to show you this slide. This is some of our marketing around the week, and I want to thank the League for their partnership on this effort. And I want to just quickly mention what we've currently asked our colleges to do. Chancellor Oakley sent an email to the CEOs a couple of weeks ago asking for 3 explicit actions. The first is for them to declare Undocumented Student Week of Action at their local college and appoint a point person for us to coordinate with around activities. The second is for them to participate in a survey being conducted by the foundation. Essentially, we're trying to understand what services are currently being provided to undocumented students in our state. From that survey, we'll put together a list of best practices and support colleges in implementing some of those best practices. And the third item, which all of our board members would also be welcome to participate in, is a webinar that will happen on Wednesday where we'll talk through both the support services and resources available to colleges if they want to engage in those support services, as well as the advocacy activities that are underway by the students. I just wanted to mention the support services will focus on themed days. Each one of these 5 themes will have a webinar associated with it, as well as a list of resources. So just to give an example, on Monday, we'll have a webinar focused on paying for college. We'll talk a lot about the Dreamer application process, and we'll simultaneously encourage colleges to set up their own Dreamer application drives locally. The rest of the days follow a similar format. I want to turn it over now to Larry Galizio, who's a CEO of the Community College League of California, and invite him as a partner in this to make some comments.
Thank you very much, and I'll be very brief. I did want to recognize there's been a lot of discussion, understandably, about affordability, food and housing issues, and yes, still behind me is President Pam Luster from San Diego Mesa, and she and Compton College President Keith Curry are leading a task force on affordability, food, and housing access. And I'm sure this body will be hearing a lot more about that. The trustee board that Member Haynes is on is also doing work there. So it's a little tangentially related, although it is related. I wanted to give her that recognition. Number one is the League has created a toolkit that will be available on our website this Wednesday, for statewide utilization with a variety of things in alignment with the different activities. And we encourage partner organizations who are currently not working on this to join, and we'd be happy to talk with them. And before I turn it over to Vice President Valerie Johnson, I do want to emphasize that this is a collaborative effort working with the Chancellor's Office, the League, FAC, and other partner organizations. However, this is a student-led effort. It really is. At the end of the day, on each of the campuses, it will be the Student Senate and the students who are leading this effort. And that's what is inspiring for us and so exciting. So you've already met Valerie Johnson. She's, as a reminder, she's representing the Student Senate. She's the Vice President for System Affairs for the Senate. Prior to that, she was the System Affairs Director for her region. She's been really active in efforts to address students' basic needs, working on financial reform, and obviously advocating on students, on the behalf of undocumented students. So, Valerie, Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Larry. As Larry said, this really is going to be something that is going to be put in the hands of the students. And the students have asked us for this. They want this, and they really are passionate about supporting these students from undocumented backgrounds, whether they be DACA recipients or not, any student who is undocumented. So as we did last year, we're going to be participating in some advocacy efforts, and we've really asked the students, and we've seen the students push for the advocacy to be put in their hands. So this is going to be in a few different forms. As Laura mentioned, each day will have a theme, and we will be encouraging students to be active on social media, which is a big platform that students utilize in order to spread information, share efforts, and promote ideas. So we've created, in collaboration with the League, a lot of really good graphics and things to be shared of that nature. And we've also been working to develop a postcard campaign, which we were really successful in last year. And now, given that we have more time than we did last year, we're really expecting to have a large number of postcards to be delivered. We'd like to deliver them directly to our representatives if possible. During this week of action, our representatives will be in their home districts, and so we've been planning on efforts to have students deliver these postcards directly to their representatives and advocate that DACA be codified into law as soon as possible. And the support here really is from the students. The Student Senate has just been there to basically put, our name on it, like, yes, the students want this. So this really is a collaborative effort, and we really look forward to supporting it and working with the students to implement it, and we want to see action. We didn't want to have to do this again this year, but because we do, we want to do it as efficiently as possible. So that'll be done again through the postcard campaign, social media, education of students and other interested parties on the efforts to support undocumented students, and just continuing our efforts to put DACA codified into law. Thank you.
And then just a preview for you, this is the front of the postcard that will be going out. And then this is the back of the postcard. So it allows students to fill in some personal comments about why they care about this issue. And then just as a reminder, we'll be having our webinar on Wednesday. I hope that board members will feel welcome to participate. We're asking all of our colleges to participate. And I did just really quickly want to say part of the reason we thought of having both the advocacy as well as the support service side of the project this year is because of some of the initiative that many of our colleges took last year. San Diego, Porterville, a lot of places sent us comments that they took the week of action that we had declared and turned it into a week of awareness around undocumented students. Many had movie nights. They did register to vote activities for undocu allies. So I just really want to recognize the work of the colleges, thank them for those ideas that they shared with us, and hope for a successful week of activity that will occur this October. And hopefully we'll see congressional action.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Valerie and Larry. Any comments by the board? Vice President Haynes.
So I realized that you didn't want to do this year, but I'm really glad that you are, because we have to keep this issue in front of everyone, and it needs to be loud enough that it makes its way to Washington, D.C. through our legislators and anyone else. And one of the action items that you have is just really, I'm really glad to see it there. It's the one, my vote, and then it says something else. We have allies, and while undocumented students can't vote, we have family members, we have friends. We need to make certain that they are registered to vote their concerns around this issue. There are so many issues, but we've got to keep this front and center. California is one of the largest states that has undocumented students here and other students under the program. So to the extent that we keep this issue first in the front of everyone's mind, the better off we're going to be to make certain that it's resolved in our favor.
Great. Okay, can I get a motion for this?
So move.
I second.
Anderson and Haynes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we're going to skip 2.9, move on to 2.10, which we're going to try and do in about 10 to 15 minutes.
All they need is 10.
We're going to need 10, but I will be really quick. This item reviews the progress made towards the Vision for Success over the last 9 months, as well as response to a request from the Board of Governors back in January of 2018 to review goals 1 and 4 of the Vision for Success and to provide input on the timing for the annual State of the System report. Before I hand it over to Executive Director of the Success Center, Sandy Freed, I wanted to just highlight a few of the things that we included in your agenda. Over the last 9 months, under the leadership of Chancellor Oakley, our office has achieved immense progress in terms of laying the foundation to move forward and to actually measure the impact of the Vision for Success. Some of those big pieces that I'll just highlight is really getting self-assessments for guided pathways from all campuses. This progress indicates full system participation in guided pathways. We also made significant progress in moving forward with the necessary steps to implement AB 705, and we have a lot more work to do there, but a lot to celebrate in the last 9 months. We have also eliminated barriers for colleges serving undocumented students by removing the prohibition on college districts from receiving apportionment for undocumented students taking non-credit coursework. And that was led by our legal counsel. And we took significant steps to leverage technology to increase educational access and success for all students. And then lastly, I'll just mention a really big focus on thinking about transfers and the MOU that Chancellor Oakley led with the UC system, as well as our independent nonprofit colleges and universities. So we are very thankful to our staff and all of you for setting very high goals. And now, speaking of high goals, I'm going to hand it over to Sandy, who will talk to you about setting even more aggressive goals.
Thank you. Sandy Freed with the Success Center and the Foundation, and I'd like to invite Laura Coleman and Tina No Bartel from the Centers of Excellence to come up and join me. Essentially, this item is going to do two things. First, we're going to provide you with a review of goals 1 and 4 per your request back in January. New data, we received new data about those goals, and the board had asked for an update to see if they were still appropriate. And secondly, the representatives from the Centers of Excellence are going to do an illustration of how they work with colleges to help them identify regional employment needs to ensure students are getting those in-demand jobs we want them to get. So I'm going to quickly go through and cut to the chase, as Board President Epstein requested. So the first goal, goal 4, we are recommending that we increase the percentage from 69 to 76% of CTE students who obtain a job in their field of study. This goal is based on the CTE Outcomes Survey, and when we first created this goal in the vision, 68 colleges were participating in that survey. Now that we have all 114, we need to adjust the goal to reflect a broader participation, and that takes the goal to 76%. The second recommendation is pretty straightforward. We recommend moving the State of the System report from January to March when we have fresher data. Specifically, we have all of our transfer data validated. That way, you've got the freshest data, and we are using the same baseline across all vision goal metrics. And finally, the last goal, which was the most complicated, and I'd like to just take a moment to thank the data work group team. They were small but mighty. They did all the number crunching for these goals. John Stanskas from the Academic Senate, Stacy Fisher from the Success Center, Alyssa Wynn with RP Group, Kathy Booth with WestEd, and Sarah Aiden from the Chancellor's Office were immensely helpful, and I want to thank them for that. So this goal was the most complicated. The 20% was based on an estimation of workforce demand created by the Bureau for Labor Statistics. Last August, they changed their methodology, which greatly expanded their estimation of demand, which completely threw off everyone's numbers who used the BLS data. The work group, I'll show you the process they followed. They met with those doing similar work, relying on the BLS data, and conducted additional analyses. And their recommendation is that the 20% goal be retained, that it is realistic, it's aggressive, and that there's no need to change it at this point in time. But they also did suggest that we focus on detailed regional analyses to identify in-demand jobs, which is a really important component of this goal. We want students to complete, but we also want them to get meaningful jobs and meet our regional workforce needs. And with that, I'm happy to take questions and to introduce our witnesses from the Centers of Excellence.
Yes, Member Zaragoza.
My question is on increasing goal number 4 from 69% to 76%. I was wondering, although it's working for the top quintile of colleges, if this increase is feasible for areas with regional achievement gaps that don't have as many diverse options for jobs in the area and in many cases struggle with post-college employment in general.
So the board, when they adopted this goal, felt like that was a reasonable goal for all colleges to shoot for. But I will also point out that we are doing additional research in those areas. There are 4 areas in the state that do have those educational inequities, and we're doing additional research to understand those inequities to better help colleges address them.
Yes, Member Fong.
Clarification. So on the 69 to 76, you said originally there were 68 campuses that participated, and then you got data from 114. What was the trigger to increase the number? Was it because that more colleges were reporting a higher number?
Yes. Yeah, with more colleges reporting, the number increased.
And the number did
Yeah,
increase.
so we hit that 69% in the first year, which meant we needed to make it a little more aggressive.
Okay. And then on the second one, maintaining the 20%, you said the BLS has drastically changed its method of collection or data. What's the change? I'm curious.
So it used to be that the BLS only counted demand as workers that exited the workforce, so retirements. So that was what they calculated as demand, the people that left the workforce. They've now expanded that to include people that switched jobs in mid-career. So Chancellor Oakley left Long Beach City College to become the chancellor. They now consider that a vacancy, even though there is a supply of workers available. We don't need to add new workers. There are workers available in the workforce now to assume that position. So while the BLS changed its calculation of demand, we don't have a commensurate way to account for supply, and that's kind of the piece we're missing to be able to recreate the data set for that goal.
Okay, so we need to approve these changes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Member
Second.
Anderson has been quite a motion maker today. And Walker Griffin is the seconder. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Okay. Well, last but certainly not, thank you very much, you all. Last but not least, oh, do you have something else?
Yes, we have Laura Coleman and Tina Nobartel from the Centers for Excellence who are going to do a little illustration about how they work with colleges to meet regional employment needs.
Okay, I apologize.
Good afternoon. Thank you. We'll be brief. I just wanted to make a few comments about who we are and how we're set up and how we inserted ourselves in this conversation. So the Centers of Excellence for Labor Market Research are a program funded out of the Chancellor's office. We're under the Workforce and Economic Development Division and currently serve under Director Lynn Shaw. So we are a 10-member group, and we have 7 centers across the state, each supporting one region of colleges. So I'm not going to go through all my slides. It's late in the day, and I think they're pretty clear. So, but what we do is we work with the colleges when they're getting ready to start a new program, revise an existing program, and need labor market information. So I say the words labor market information a lot, but what you all say are in-demand jobs, living wage, high wage, all of those phrases. So when those phrases come up, that's when our phones start ringing and our inbox starts filling up. So I'm going to give you 3 examples, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tina. The types of projects we work with and what they produce will look something like this. At a local level, we may get a request from Sacramento City College to look into beverage manufacturing and whether or not there's an opportunity for them to expand their programs. From a regional perspective, we may look at middle skill jobs across our region of colleges and assess which ones are most in demand. And then from an emerging and statewide perspective, we may look into something like cybersecurity, which we just recently completed, and assess what's the job market out there, what are those roles really, before the data is created, because that's such a new area. And so we'll do that on a statewide basis with partners at the state and federal level. So I'm going to turn it over to Tina, who's going to talk a little bit about how that conversation happens in the region, because data without that conversation isn't that useful.
So the importance of having a strategic vision is that it has to be played out at the regional level. So regionally, the Centers for Labor Market Research, we look at what the job market looks like and then inform the colleges whether or not they need to increase, revise, or retire some outdated programs. So looking at this statewide goal of increasing the 20% of certificates, awards, or degrees that lead to an in-demand job, we need to know regionally what are those in-demand jobs. So at the Center of Excellence level, we do things such as regional scans, or basically identifying the top, in my case, the top 100 middle skill jobs in our region that the community colleges can train for. So we found that of the top 100 middle skill jobs in San Diego County, we also did one for Imperial, but in San Diego County, there were over 45,000 annual job openings per year for middle skill jobs, those top middle skill jobs. And we, as a regional community college system, were only generating about half of those awards. So we saw that there were a lot of opportunities for us to close the gap. But this is a very lofty image. It's just all top middle skill jobs. What does it mean for the sectors? So we met under our leadership in SEDICA for our six of the 7 priority and emerging sectors and analyzed the labor market demand, the gaps, and where we have opportunities for increased capacity for each of those sectors. And then we came up with a strategy for each of the sectors, which we will implement in our regional plan. So this is what you're providing to us when you create a strategic vision. We see the goal increase awards for in-demand jobs, and then we at the regional level figure out how to strategize to get to that increased number. I'm not going to walk you through all 6 sectors for the interest of time. I'm just going to give you one really neat example because San Diego is very well known for our life sciences sector. So when we looked at the life sciences and biotechnology sector, we looked at a graph that looked like this. And don't let it fool you, it's not too complicated, but at the gray bar, what you're looking at is labor market demand for an occupation in life sciences and biotech. The teal bar is the labor market supply that's generated by the region's community college system. I see some raised eyebrows, that's good. The orange bar is the supply from the non-community college system. So as you can see that huge gray bar, there's a huge gap for each of these occupations in biotech and life sciences, particularly for middle skill jobs. You'll see that each of the occupations that have an asterisk are actually trained by one top code or one program. So another way to look at this is to combine all the occupations together that are trained by that one program and look at the labor market demand. So for those 4 occupations, there is a labor market demand of over 1,200, almost 1,200 annual openings per year. 1,200 annuals opening per year for those 4 jobs. And there's only one program in the region that trains for it, which is biotech and biomedical technology. So looking at this, of course, our region raises eyebrows and say, why don't we just increase the number of awards by creating more programs in the region? Well, we tried that. So actually in Southwestern, we created a biotechnology program. And it was very difficult because we didn't look at the labor market. That's where the COE comes in. When you look at the labor market, you'll see that employers are actually located in North County, San Diego. Southwestern and then South County. And we found that a lot of students in South County weren't aware of the companies that existed or the jobs that existed in life sciences. So we as a system need to do more in terms of marketing those jobs and those businesses, especially for students who are willing and able to commute that far. If you've ever driven in San Diego in the morning from south to north, it will take you at least 2 hours to get here to Carlsbad, if not more. So that's just one of our sector strategies, and I'm not going to go through the rest of them, but essentially that's what we did for each sector to figure out what were the gaps and what as a region have we done before, and communicate with each other what should we do in the future. Thank you.
And you have the PowerPoint of all the slides in your
I
packets.
apologize for rushing you on this.
Sure, no problem.
We did all get the PowerPoints in advance, so I do recall seeing that bar, and we appreciate all you're doing. Does anybody have any questions for the presenters? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Really impressive.
So now, last but certainly not least, we want to recognize 8 former board members, only one of whom is here to collect their trophy. But we welcome her with open arms, former board member Deborah Malamud. And well, no, it will. No, have a seat. And we'll,
Hold that spot right there.
there.
Don't move. Don't move, Deb.
Yeah, that's good.
As was mentioned, we wanted to recognize all the former members of the Board of Governors, Mr. Gary Reed, Dr. Joseph Bolensky, Danny Hawkins, Scott Budnick, Nancy Sumner, Cecilia Estelano, and Jeff Burdick. We do have one very important former Board of Governor member here, Dr. Debbie Malumed. Dr. Malumed served on the Board of Governors from 2005 to 2017. She has served as a family medicine physician with Southern California Permanente, although certainly been practicing in Washington, D.C. as well, in her other role as the First Lady of my congressional district, and has had a lengthy career working with every major medical group. We want to thank her for her service to the California Community College system and invite her up to receive a very heavy award and to say a few words, Debbie. Let's take a picture first. Come over here, Tom.
I showed him on Delili on this.
It's heavy.
Thank you so much, and I am sorry the other members couldn't make it. It is a lot of work to get to your meetings, and we're all busy people. I was here, I prepared a small speech. I wanted to thank Governor Schwarzenegger, who appointed me all those years back, and Governor Brown for this opportunity. I believe I did a good job on the board. I represented the public's interests and oversight. The colleges have improved in many ways that we should all be proud of. Thank you to the 5 chancellors I worked with, everyone in the chancellor's office, all the Board of Governors members over the years, the many stakeholders, I know there's many others, and the local Board of Trustee members who helped me and have become my friends. Thank you so much, and I'm sure the other board members appreciate all this too who couldn't make it. So thank you so much. Thank
We will package it up for you. Heavy.
Yeah,
Sure?
I'll let you package it. Yeah. Yeah, tombstones.
And
Thank you.
I think we have a few members that want to speak to
Yeah.
this item.
Hold it.
Member, well,
Debbie.
she can sit down and.
Oh, she can sit down. She can sit there.
Member Shaw.
Yeah, I just want to thank you so much for 12 years of service here on this board. I joined the board 3 years ago, and in the last 3 years, we've probably lost about 7 people that he recounted. And I think when I was on city board for many years, celebrating the tenure of people was really, really important. So that's why I'm so pleased that the Chancellor chose to do this. And thank you for being kind to me when I first came on the board. Kindness is important. And again, I just want to thank you for your contributions.
Member Baum.
I also wanted to express my appreciation to Debbie. Debbie was my first board president when I joined the board, and Deborah was the board president right at the time the financial crisis began to hit our system and our state and our nation. And she was instrumental also in the recruitment of Jack Scott as the chancellor. That really put the system on a path toward reform and restructuring that we're seeing the benefits of today, when we're used to now having budget surpluses and a lot of support in the state capitol for what we do. That wasn't the case beforehand. And the strategic move to recruit somebody like Jack Scott to be the chancellor at the time and to start what we called the Student Success Task Force back then, created a momentum that is carried through today. And Debbie was at the helm and held the gavel to get that all off the ground.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say a few things. When I started on the board about 4.5 years ago, you were one of the first board members that I really had a deep conversation with. Basically taught me the ropes of all the politics going on here and what I should focus on, and it proved to be invaluable. And I really appreciated your counsel back then. And we got to talk a little bit about healthcare and congressional politics too, which always fun. And so we're so glad that you were able to make it in person and joining us tonight, I hope. And that's great.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
thank you so much.
Sure. Also,
Super sweet.
I also just want to, for the board members that aren't here, I wish that we could each honor them in person as well. They all did great service. I particularly want to thank Cecilia, who was a tough act to follow, but I think set a real strong example of what a president should be, and I thought she did a terrific job. And we'll miss her, but know that she's on to other important things in education that will hopefully redound to our benefit as well. And Member Walker Griffith also.
Thank you, President Epstein, and thank you for your service, ma'am. I wanted to shout out my dear friend and former student member of the California Community College's Board of Governors, Amon Dalili, who his term recently ended, whose seat I'm filling in right now. He was a very strong advocate for students, and now he's doing amazing things at UC Berkeley. So I just wanted to shout him out.
Also interned for my son this summer. All right, I think with that, we've got a wrap. We will reconvene at 9:30 tomorrow. Oops. No, there is a public comment. Oh.
Well, on that note, I just wanted to let the Board of Governors know that for tomorrow, we're going to park in parking lot N, which is just right over here, and we'll meet right here where the balloons are today, and then we'll walk over to L246. And we're meeting around 8:30 to 9:15.
And so we're not meeting in this room.
Okay.
No, the closed session will be in L246, and then we'll come back here for the Board of Governors meeting. Yes.
So I guess I need to officially announce that there will be a closed session at 8:30. We'll convene the regular session at 9:30, and look forward to seeing as many of you who can tolerate another day as possible.
Excuse me, Tom. Are we doing public comment? We do have someone
We
who
do
won't be
have
here
public-
tomorrow that would like to say something.
I apologize.
It's okay.
Not good on my job. So we have Kim Perego.
Good evening, Chancellor, President Epstein, and the board. I know you're ready to get out of here, so I'm going to be brief. My name is Kim Perego. I'm the Academic Senate President at San Diego Mesa College. I represent roughly 900 faculty members, and Mesa's faculty wants to welcome you all to San Diego, which we call America's finest city for lots of reasons. I wanted to start with my public comments by I wanted to frame my comments by sharing a fable I once heard about a centipede who had arthritis. And he sought the advice of an owl, a very wise owl, who said, "Centipede, you have 100 legs all swollen up. Now, if I were you, I'd change myself into a stork. With only 2 legs, you could cut your pain by 98%, and if you use your wings, you can stay off your legs altogether." The centipede, of course, was elated and said, "I accept your suggestion without hesitation. Now, can you just tell me how I go about making this change?" "Oh," said the owl, "I would not know these details. I only make general policy. I think this fable sort of frames what I want to talk to you about today, because many of the mandates that are coming down to college campuses, whether it be from the legislature, the governor, this board, or any other areas, all too often are sort of lacking the collective wisdom of those who have the knowledge to operationalize your visions and goals. Additionally, many of these decisions do not honor local differences and do not honor local governing boards. So I'm glad to hear that there's a listening tour and other efforts. For example, does this board know that the associate degree for transfer, which now carries the promise of funding to our colleges, all but shuts the door to San Diego State for some of our disciplines and some of our students? In this region, that is not necessarily the best way to transfer to their preferred transfer institution, nor does it align with the values of our students who would like to get to the UC system or to private colleges, because we're placing preference on the ADT to CSUs. So I'm here to say that sometimes a Band-Aid is a solution for bleeding, but never solves a chainsaw accident. Wishing to become a stork doesn't make it so. You have to make sure that the people who can provide dynamic solutions are at the table, and that all stakeholders, including faculty, staff, administrators, and especially students, are part of that conversation. We were very encouraged when we came back from our break in the summer and learned from ASCCC President John Stankis that there was a renewed commitment from the Chancellor's office and from this board to engage in collegial consultation. And we'll be watching very carefully to make sure that that's transparent and that we are doing collective decision making. So make no mistake, I want this board to know that we're up for change. We welcome a chance to engage in meaningful dialogue that honors the board's Standing Order 332, that recognizes academic and professional matters, that the board will rely on the advice of the Academic Senate, and we hope that that will still continue. And we look forward to a sustained model of accountability with respectability to collegiality. So again, we're happy to hear your renewed interest today, and I want to thank everybody for being here and allowing me to make these public comments, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your time in San Diego. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know you don't want to hear one more thing, but I feel like in the spirit of inclusiveness, I should talk about the other BOG members who weren't mentioned, all of whom I served with, and I think Board Member Shaw did too. So just to mention of each one of them, Gary Reed, I think who we all knew for his quiet and wise perspective for all of us. Joseph and Danny for keeping us to task on procedures and some of the minutia of the community college system. Jeff Burdick, quiet but very effective. Scott Budnick, the master of multitasking.
Wow.
Scott was usually
man.
doing 10 things at every meeting. And certainly Nancy's wonderful, passionate advocating for veterans. So it was a pleasure to serve with all of them. And I just felt that we should mention each one before we close.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that.
Our next speaker is Linda Waugh.
On data desegregation that was originally scheduled for today but had to be moved because of your full schedule and is scheduled for November. But I really just wanted to thank the Chancellor and all of the Board of Governors for supporting this really important project. Some of you may have remembered that I've come several times to speak on this. This is something that the Joint Caucuses of the community colleges has supported as one of our highest priorities for collecting demographic data and disaggregating that data for the benefit of our students. We were one of the, it had already been started by the UC system and the Cal State system. And so the community college system, which serves the greatest number of our students, this is a really important project. So I just really wanted to take that opportunity to thank you and to say that we're looking forward to hearing this on the November agenda item. And I was going to be joined by a number of the colleges and my colleagues who wanted to come to support this, a number of them here in San Diego, but they have said that they certainly want to be there in November to also personally thank you all for all of the work on this.
Thank you.
And then our last speaker would be Marie McMahon.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Board President, Vice President, Chancellor Oakley, and distinguished members. I'm thrilled to actually be able to be present at this meeting and find out all the exciting things that you discussed. So thank you for that opportunity. I'm a full-time faculty member. I've been teaching anatomy and physiology for 19 years in San Diego, and I love it. I'm currently the Academic Senate President at Miramar College, and that's another story. But what I had to do, what we have to do when we're becoming campus leaders is we go away from the classroom. So currently in my biology, my beloved biology, 75% of our courses at our campus in biology are taught by part-time faculty. And that's not a disparaging remark, it's just a fact. And now with guided pathways, and we're asking for more faculty involvement, what we need is more full-time faculty. I'll just cut to the chase. I think all of those things that we really want to do and we really want to do well require that foundation. It would solve so many, or begin to solve so many problems. So I just wanted to whisper in your ear how important that was, and thank you.
Thank you. I think that brings a close to our proceedings. We will reconvene tomorrow at 9:30 in public.